Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into an incredibly complex, highly charged situation that all came to a head with a stunning federal court ruling on May 22nd. We're going to unpack a case involving some severe criminal allegations, Supreme Court interventions, and a very, very rare legal maneuver. Let's jump right in. We're starting right out of the gate with this massive statement from U.S. District Judge Waverly Crenshaw Jr. over in Tennessee. He called the situation an abuse of prosecuting power. Now, it's not every day you hear a federal judge use that kind of language to describe the actions of the United States government, right? But this single sentence literally stopped a major high-stakes criminal case dead in its tracks. So to understand how we got to that dramatic conclusion, we'll walk through 5 clear steps today. A shocking case dismissal, the smuggling allegations, deportation and the Supreme Court, the source of vindictiveness, and finally, why impartiality matters. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, a shocking case dismissal. On May 22nd, Judge Crenshaw made a sweeping decision. He completely dismissed pending criminal human smuggling charges against a Salvadoran national named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And this wasn't just some minor administrative dismissal or a technicality over paperwork. No, this was a federal judge outright throwing away a massive indictment brought by the Department of Justice. What's really fascinating here is the explicit reason for the dismissal. It was based on a concept called vindictive prosecution. Now, this is exceptionally rare in the legal world. Basically, it happens when a court determines the government is charging someone as a form of retaliation. Specifically, retaliating against a defendant just because they lawfully exercised their legal or constitutional rights. It's basically the government settling a score. Which brings us to Section 2. These smuggling allegations. To fully grasp the weight of a judge throwing this entire case out, we really have to impartially examine just how severe the government's allegations were. Back in May of 2025, the DOJ brought a super heavy indictment against Abrego. They alleged he conspired to smuggle undocumented individuals into the U.S. from places like Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Ecuador. They claimed his network unlawfully transported thousands of people through Mexico into Texas for financial payment. And the final 2 points are arguably the most severe. They alleged Abrego was actually a member, an associate of the MS-13 transnational criminal organization, and that he used that status to further this whole conspiracy. To give you the full context of those allegations, the government's stance was that this wasn't just some low-level operation. The DOJ describes MS-13 as a criminal enterprise heavily engaged in acts involving murder, extortion, narcotics, firearms trafficking, and money laundering. The indictment even claimed many of the thousands of people allegedly transported were themselves MS-13 members. So we're talking about extremely serious allegations leveled by the federal government here. Moving on to Section 3, deportation and the Supreme Court. Okay, so here is the crucial turning point. We have to look at how this federal criminal indictment collided with Abrego's entirely separate immigration case. The sequence of these specific events is the absolute bedrock of the entire legal argument. Just look at how this timeline builds. Back in November 2022, Abrego was involved in a traffic stop in Tennessee. That investigation was completely closed. Fast forward to March 2025, he's detained by the federal government and deported to El Salvador, which sparked these long-running legal battles with the Trump administration. Then, in the spring of 2025, the Supreme Court actually orders the administration to facilitate his return to the U.S. And then boom, almost immediately in May 2025, this massive new federal criminal indictment is brought against him. To really understand the stakes of that civil battle, we should note that before the Supreme Court ordered his return, Abrego's deportation definitely wasn't standard. He was transported to El Salvador's maximum security prison, the Terrorism Confinement Center, alongside an airplane full of other deportees. This move actually generated widespread protests across the country. He fought this removal in civil court and he won. This perfectly sets up Section 4, the source of vindictiveness. This comparison is basically the linchpin of the whole case. On one side, Abrego successfully exercises his legal rights and wins a Supreme Court order for his return. On the flip side, the judge noted that within just days of that order, the Department of Homeland Security abruptly reopened that closed 2022 traffic stop investigation we mentioned earlier. And less than a month later, the DOJ formally charged him. For the court, that timing was highly, highly suspicious. Judge Crenshaw looked at that timeline and concluded, and I quote, "The objective evidence here shows that Absent Abrego's successful lawsuit challenging his removal to El Salvador, the government would not have brought this prosecution. So the court officially ruled that the new criminal charges were a direct reaction to Abrego's successfully beating the government in civil court. But, it wasn't just the timeline. The real smoking gun for the judge was found in public statements made by senior DOJ official Todd Blanche, who's now the acting U.S. Attorney General. The court findings highlighted what Judge Crenshaw called remarkable statements from Blanche, which indicated the federal government only started investigating Abrego criminally after a Maryland judge questioned their decision to deport him. The court held that Blanche's own words directly established that the whole motivation for the criminal charges stemmed right from Abrego exercising his constitutional rights in his civil suit. By directly linking the new criminal probe to Abrego's ongoing civil legal battles, the court determined the government crossed a firm line. Judge Crenshaw explicitly stated that the reopening of the previously concluded investigation is the source of the vindictiveness. Basically, the government wasn't just pursuing justice for a crime. According to the judge, they were retaliating for a legal defeat. And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, Why Impartiality Matters. In his ruling, Judge Crenshaw quoted prior legal precedent to remind everyone of a really fundamental truth about our justice system. A prosecutor's exercise of coercive power must be impartial, even-handed, and applied without favoritism or bias. The takeaway here is that regardless of how severe the alleged crimes might be, the application of state power has to remain completely unbiased. It literally cannot be used as a weapon to punish people just because they challenge the government. Naturally, immigrant advocacy groups really celebrated the judge's ruling, viewing it as a critical check against what they saw as a political vendetta. Amma Frimpong, the chief of services at the advocacy group We Are CASA, told the Epoch Times, "The federal administration brazenly attempted to weaponize the criminal legal system to punish Kilmar for exposing their unlawful actions. So for these groups, the dismissal was a total validation of their claims of government overreach." Abrego himself also responded to the dismissal. Communicating through his advocacy group, he said, "Justice is a big word and an even bigger promise to fulfill, and I am grateful that today justice has taken a step forward." It's a statement that really acknowledges the massive and honestly sometimes overwhelming weight of the judicial system's promise to remain fair. Ultimately, this explainer leaves us with a profound question to chew on. How do we balance the very real need to prosecute severe allegations, like vast transnational smuggling networks, with the absolute vital necessity of preventing the weaponization of our justice system? It is an incredibly delicate scale, and as this case clearly illustrates, keeping it balanced in highly charged political environments requires constant vigilance. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.